Greetings and salutations, Dave, or I guess technically I should call you Dead on Dave. This is Christopher Daniels.
Hey everyone, it's the Native American Tonka. Want to give a big shout out to Dead on Dave.
Dave, this is Leon White, Big Van Vader.
Dead on Dave. What's up, man? It's the coach.
Hello, this is the hardcore legend Mick Foley, and I know when I want to keep up with the latest in wrestling news from around the world, I check in with Dead on Dave Productions. He covers a wide variety of wrestling topics, including the career of the hardcore legend. Don't miss it. Dead on Productions. Yeah.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy, Dead on Dave. And, you know, we talk about a lot of things on this show as far as, you know, kayfabe, not kayfabe, shoots, works. In fact, we talked about one yesterday with The Miz and what was the situation with his promo. Is it a work? Is it a shoot? Is it half work? And all of these things. And, well, I don't think people realize how big of a discussion and how big of a conflict this can cause sometimes backstage. Wrestlers are very territorial. The longer you've been somewhere, the older you are, the more that you feel that you have earned in the company as far as respect, you know, locker room presence, whatever the case may be. And this all plays into the big story, one of the big stories that is coming out of SummerSlam from the Brock Lesnar-Randy Orton match. The ending, more specifically, which caused, let's not friggin' beat around the bush here. It caused this. The ending of that match caused this, which is not a blade job, folks. Randy Orton was cracked open. I'm plain and simple, cracked open. And it caused a little bit of controversy backstage because with Brock Lesnar matches, as it's become the norm, people don't know what's real and what's not anymore. And that is the first problem I actually want to talk about with this entire situation. And so when we get to it, that's going to be the first thing, because that's a problem in and of itself. So Brock smashes Randy open. In the back, wrestlers, foremost of them being Chris Jericho, who is a locker room leader, who is a veteran. He's one of the greatest of all time. I mean, if there are people who are going to stick up for the rest of the people in the back, including a guy like Randy Orton, it would be Chris Jericho. There's not too many people that have that type of sway, that have that type of ability to speak up for anybody else in the locker room, let alone a veteran, a 38-year-old, whatever he is, in Randy Orton. Chris Jericho's one of them. So Chris sees this ending and not knowing if it's a work or if it's, you know, something that if it's just a shoot. If Brock decided to just go rogue and beat the shit out of Randy Orton. Chris is understandably upset by this. He needs to know. So he goes and asks everybody in gorilla position what's going on. Nobody's answering him, okay? Nobody's telling him what's happening. And that's a problem too. Nobody is communicating exactly what is going on. Now, everything that I'm about to say is all courtesy of guys like Dave Meltzer and another place that I got a lot of information from on this was Pro Wrestling Sheet and one of their writers, Ryan Satin. Lots of good information out there, all right? But those are the two major sources that I'm citing for this information, okay? So Randy's laying in the ring in a puddle of his own blood, and Chris is still trying to figure out information. Nobody's telling him what's going on, and to which Jericho gets upset and says, this is absolute bullshit. At that moment when he says that, Brock Lesnar hears it as he's coming in and just simply tells Chris Jericho that none of this is his fucking business. Mind your own business, Chris. And Jericho, that is the one answer he did not want to hear at that moment. Just at that time, the one thing he didn't want to hear. So Chris loses his mind and gets up in Jericho's face, to which Brock shoves him, because that's what Brock's going to do. And at that point, Chris really starts to get in his face, and Brock kisses him on the forehead, reportedly, and he says, a very funny line, but very disrespectful. Kiss me back, pussy. Okay? At that moment, Chris does not back down and actually steps up and gets further into Lesnar's face, ready to fight at this point. But Brock puts his hands behind his back and says to him, allegedly, hit me or kiss me, bitch. Everybody in the locker rooms, or everyone in the back in Gorilla, start to freak out and they swarm. Triple H starts pulling them apart. Vince McMahon starts pulling them apart. And apparently, Vince, being the Brock guy that he is at this point, blames Chris Jericho and saying, it's a work. What's wrong with you? So he's implying that the blood job was planned and all of that. But nobody told Chris this. So there was no way of him knowing. On the other side of it, apparently Triple H was taking Chris's side, saying Brock started this altercation. So this was absolutely crazy for so many levels, and everybody has some culpability here. This should not have happened, all right? First and foremost, this should never happen, ever, 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 ever. And everybody's at fault here. But the biggest problem, as usually it begins with, is lack of communication, all right? It's inherently wrong that nobody will talk about Brock Lesnar's matches. Nobody will tell people what's going on with Brock Lesnar's situations. Now, I understand that you're trying to protect finishes and you're trying to keep leaks from getting out and all that, but they're going to get out regardless. You can't have veterans in the back wondering if their buddies are seriously hurt. And which leads me to another big issue here. Why is anybody truly worried that Brock Lesnar would do something like this? Okay, that's a huge worry in and of itself. That should tell you maybe this guy's not worth the fucking problem. If that's a legitimate concern from a guy like Chris Jericho, who has been around the business, who has seen literally everything, every crazy experience, he doesn't even know. He's not even comfortable with thinking that Brock wouldn't be capable of just going rogue and busting Randy Orton's head open like that. Because let's be honest, this is what Jericho is defending. He's defending this. He's trying to figure out why this happened. He is scared because of this. And he has every goddamn right to be. Because look at this. That is terrifying shit. That's not a blade job. That is somebody's cranium being cracked the fuck open. That's what we're talking about. Keep that in mind as we continue on here. Now, you also have the other side of this, where it's understandable why a guy like Brock Lesnar would get furious at anybody else at this point, especially questioning anything he does. Brock has, he feels he has earned everything that he's getting, every benefit of doubt, every exemption, and a whole lot more. Brock doesn't like to be messed with. He doesn't like to be questioned. He doesn't. And by his own words, this is not me reaching. This is Brock, his own words. This is who he is. It's who he portrayed. And I get that. However, even after a match like that, responding to a guy like Jericho in that manner, get out of the way or kiss me or hit me pussy and stuff like that, I don't think that's acceptable under almost any circumstance in this situation. In this situation, a simple, we planned it out, Chris, would have just completely disarmed the situation. It would have been done and over. Had Brock walked back, heard that from Jericho, and just said, we talked about it, Chris, don't worry about it. I appreciate your concern, but you don't got to worry about it. Had that been presented in that way, it would have been over. And I want to know why a guy like Heyman doesn't step in. Heyman's right there with him. If he walked through Gorilla, Heyman walked through with him. Why isn't Heyman getting involved and talking to Chris? Somebody needs to be interjecting and saying something. So as much as I want to blame Jericho and Lesnar for this, a big portion of the blame is everybody around them for letting this happen in the first place. Vince McMahon, Dunn, if he's back there, Michael Hayes, who is one of the people that's been cited that Chris asked specifically and did not get an answer from, even Triple H. Everybody is culpable here because it's ridiculous that they simply did not tell them what was going on. You know, I mean, Chris is scared for Randy. That's what he is. He is worried about his fellow performers, and I get that. As a former soldier, I understand wanting to protect the people around you and making sure that no crazy shit is happening with a guy who's a loose cannon like Brock Lesnar. Brock's response is quite fucking terrifying from a lot of different standpoints. It's actually kind of scary when you think about it, because Brock has no respect for anyone around him. None, zero, zilch. So there's going to be questions whether Brock is capable of doing things like this. Brock is becoming a cancer in a lot of ways. There's enough stories now around him. There's enough failures. There's enough situation with the exemption from the wellness policy and all these things where more situations like this are going to become the norm. We're going to see it more and more. It's completely understandable for veterans and really even anybody else in the locker room to start feeling these ways towards anything that Brock Lesnar does, because you simply don't know what the guy's capable of. You don't know how far he's willing to go. You don't know. And that is pretty damn scary. It's kind of a bad situation that I'm hoping doesn't really come to a head in the worst way possible. Now, one other thing I do want to talk about before we get up out of here is the sides that were drawn. The fact that Vince McMahon instantly took Brock Lesnar's side and told Chris Jericho, "What's the matter with you? It's a work." That tells me everything I need to know about Vince McMahon's current state. He's thinking about business the way business has always been. He doesn't think there's anything wrong with what Brock Lesnar is doing. In fact, even questioning it seems absurd to him, because he feels that a guy like Chris Jericho should understand what's happening, even though there is no boundaries to what Lesnar has the capability of doing at this point. They've taken the shackles off. They've exempted him from things that are applicable to everybody else in the company. So this is of their own doing, but Vince is disconnected from that. To me, that shows a clear disconnect between Vince McMahon and the locker room. That's a scary notion. Now, on the other side of that, Triple H instantly goes to Jericho's defense and says, "No, Lesnar fucking started this thing." Now, that tells me the type of leader that Triple H is. And this is nothing we already didn't know. Triple H is a wrestler's leader, and Vince is a business leader. They're very different fundamental guys. And honestly, I kind of needed to know that. I kind of needed to see that in practice, because everybody worries about what's going to happen if and when Triple H does take over, or whatever the case may be. There are things that can destroy a locker room. There are things that can destroy the industry of wrestling. And that's how I look at this, because what Chris Jericho did in defending the locker room, regardless if he overstepped a tiny bit, which I think it's fair to say that he did, that's not going to destroy the locker room. What Chris Jericho did, never going to destroy the locker room. Chris is always going to be looked at as kind of a good guy, and apparently he did not get any heat from this situation. That is not a destructive thing that Chris Jericho did. Brock Lesnar's part in it, from the questions about whether or not it's a work to his reaction of being questioned by challenging and kissing and demoralizing a guy with the pedigree, stature, and respect of Chris Jericho, that is destructive. That is something that could take down the fundamentals of an organization, of a team, of an industry. That is a problem, no matter how you slice it. That is something that needs to be addressed, because it is a cancer. It will eat the insides of an organization alive. And that is the biggest thing that I think needs to come out of this. More people need to talk about that. I'm not saying Brock should be fired or anything like that, but there needs to be boundaries. There needs to be guidelines set for everybody. You can't have anyone that's above everybody else in far as what they're allowed to get away with. Look, everybody's going to have a little bit more leeway, but you can't have a guy who is just simply capable of anything. That is not something that is going to... Look, every job, everything that you do in life, depending on your performance, you're going to have a little bit more leeway than the guy next to you. That's okay. That's acceptable limitations. But being able to fail tests, demoralize and kiss another wrestler on the forehead while calling derogatory names and challenging to a physical altercation for simply trying to get answers to a legitimate question is not acceptable. And that's a big problem. So that's just my 2 cents on it, man. This is a crazy ass situation. And it looks like it is 100% accurate. So it looks like there's almost no questions that it happened. And it looks like there is absolutely no heat on anybody from it either. So take for what it's worth. It looks to be a situation that is already over the river, through the woods, to grandmother's house we go, whatever you want to call it. So that's my thoughts on it. I want to hear from you guys. Hit me up in the comment section or up on Twitter at @DaveV. Let me know what you think. Who's right? Who's wrong? Is there any real fault, or is this just nothing? Shut up, Batman. Who gives a shit? I want to hear from you guys. So make sure you hit me up, and I do appreciate everybody supporting the channel. I do. Make sure you guys check out Meltzer and everybody for further, more intricate details on the situation. Also, Pro Wrestling Sheet. I got a lot of information from that as well. So it is what it is. Thank you guys for joining me right here on Dead on Dave Productions. We'll see you next time. Like, subscribe, and share. And as always, if you don't have talent, have talented friends. Remember, look at this shit. Let that go in your mind. Oh my God. Terrifying. Peace.